Come on. Hi.
Hello.
I just flew in from Geneva, so I'm still... I need you guys to give me some energy. So one more time. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Awesome. So as you were saying, last year, I was at the event, and I changed my slide completely because I talked about something that was very passionate to me. This year, I'll try to keep to my slides as much as possible. And this is my first time in DEF CON, so please make me feel comfortable. Thank you. That's good. That helps a lot. My name is John Kamara, and as the folks earlier said, we're nothing special. We're just regular people, like everyone else. And I always tell people that I am not an expert at anything. The only time I become an expert is when I'm dead. So while I'm alive, I'm just a student of knowledge. I am just learning. I don't use the word expert in anything that I do, because you can't be an expert if you're still alive. How? So, how many of you are developers? Just raise your hands. Awesome, pretty much everyone. I wrote my first code in 1995. I wrote Visual Basics. Yeah, you guys are probably laughing. And it was a really funny language. I wrote it on a piece of paper in Ireland. So that's how I started learning how to code. And because I tried to go to med school for a minute, didn't work out. So I ended up trying to figure out something else to do. So I stumbled into coding and learned how to code with Visual Basics. I was going to night school, basically, trying to learn how to code, and then working in the daytime. But over the years, I've learned something that became paramount throughout my whole career: the power of data. The power of data, as far back as 1998, when I joined my first company, Yahoo in Ireland. Yahoo, anybody has a Yahoo email till today? Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today is the role of humans in AI, and what I've been advocating for the past 2.5 years, called the PDI blueprint: people, data, infrastructure. The role of humans in AI. I'm sure we probably heard about AI more than most people who are making policies in AI, right? I mean, we've been hearing about this for years, and all of a sudden, for the past 1.5 years, it's become the most important topic globally. I was doing a research the other day, and I said to someone that there's been about 3,114 AI workshops and conferences in the past 3 years than there was for the past 9 years. What does that mean? That means everyone is talking about this technology, this idea, this solution. In one way or the other, people are talking about it. But contextualize it as Africans and as human beings, what does that mean? And as organizations, what does that mean for us? So my angle on this is what I call the PDI blueprint: building data and AI-driven organizations with people at the center of the organization. Right? Those of us here, we're lucky because we can participate in the technology. But there's millions and millions and millions and millions of people who work with you who are sitting scared, not able to participate or understand how this technology will cannibalize them. Understand the word that I've said, cannibalize. And if we look at, real quick, I'm sure you guys know it, but I always like to just play around with these slides. The history of, so AI didn't start yesterday, for those who don't know, but it started a long time ago. And I always sort of say to people, can you show me an African in this image? Is there any African there? But does that mean there hasn't been Africans who were involved in AI years ago? So the point is that this technology has by definition, been part of human existence for a very, very long time. It has morphed, it has changed, and it has become a social part of our lives. So when we look at all the way to 2018, most universities in Europe, I mean, where I grew up in Ireland, have AI courses from about 2011. They've been doing courses in AI. My daughter's 15 years old. She just finished her first AI programming course. So doesn't mean that it didn't exist already. And artificial intelligence is woven into our future. And the idea is you prepare today, or you face the cost of catching up tomorrow. The choice is yours. Either organizations decide that they will prepare today, or they will decide tomorrow. The choice is theirs. In 2018, when I first moved to Nairobi, 2019 from Kenya, from Johannesburg, I remember going to one of the big corporates and talking about AI. Your company should adopt AI. It's like 2019. And the CTO looked at me and goes like, what are you talking about? We're doing stuff with data. I'm like, yeah, I know, but this technology is coming. It's coming really fast. It's probably going to take 10 years and it'll get to you. I was so wrong, right? Because within the space of 5 years, 25, 30 years of technology has happened. Technology has been wiped away. I mean, some of you who do C++, who does C++ here? Yeah, I know, right? I mean, today I was playing with Mojo. Have you seen Mojo, the new, where you can combine Python and C++, and it's so much faster. And I don't even have to learn it that quick. So I'm asking myself, what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks? What's going to happen in the next 6 months? So then you understand the cost and the speed at which this technology is moving. And I always try to contextualize everything to Africa, where we are as a people, where we are in the race for this technology, and where we are as a consumer economy for such a long time with a technology that will cannibalize a lot of what we know by default. If we don't make the transition to become a producer economy, it becomes extremely hard to move from being a consumer economy. So the evolution of digital era, all of us have, digitalization, digital transformation, and data transformation. A lot of countries, I live in East Africa most of the time when I'm not at the airport. I live on the plane. Someone asked me the other day, where do you live? I live on the plane. But when I'm at the airport, a lot of countries in Africa, and this is where the opportunity lies for a lot of us, are going through what they call digital transformation. We all understand what digital transformation means, right? Everyone. So digital transformation, but I like to play a little game. When you talk about digitalization, digital transformation, and data transformation, it's all transformation. But the question is, what is the difference? And the same thing with organizations. I was given a session with an insurance company a few weeks ago. Actually, it was not too far away from here. And they were talking about digitizing the company. They were going to go through this digital transformation process. And I said, well, I think you should stop and think about data transformation first. Data transformation. Because my view, and I said I'm not an expert, so you can query me, just like ChatGPT. So my view is that digitalization, it's not very intelligent. You basically take stuff that's on paper and you put it in an app or in a platform, the way it is. So I remember I used to go fill in my passport and my first bank account when the bank said, oh, we're not a digital bank. And it was the same 60 questions. And I'm asking myself, why are you asking me these 60 questions? It was still on paper. I just have to write it in. But there's no intelligence there because you actually can't do much with the data. Then the second part was when you talk about transformation, digital transformation, a lot of folks then start thinking, well, we don't necessarily have to do this the same way. So when we're going into this digital era, let's rethink the things that we actually want to digitize. Let's rethink how we go about it so that we can begin. I don't have to do it exactly the way it is anymore. Then it becomes a thinking man. Now you're thinking, how do I change some of these things that I'm doing to suit where I want to go? But what I love is data transformation, because in data transformation, my view is first, you think about data. You don't think about technology. You don't think about anything. You just think data. I am trying to move from X to Y. What are the data sets, first of all? What are the data sets? What are the data sets that I'm going to collect? How am I going to collect this data set? Who's going to interact with the data set? What is my data architecture first? Once I first just spend months plotting my data infrastructure, just architecting data, all to the patch where I decide that there are sets of data or parameters of data that I probably don't understand now that will happen in the future, so I make room for them. So I'm thinking purely from a data perspective. I'll give you an example. In healthcare, a lot of people build healthcare systems, right? You digitize a hospital end to end. But at the same time, when you think about data transformation, you basically think, well, instead of building the infrastructure for the hospital, let me think about the data sets first of all. Who creates the data set? It's the patient, isn't it? So until the patient interacts with the system, it's a useless system. It's just there. So if I can think, where does this person go? So what does he do? What data sets does he leave? How do I harness that data and make it live? So I basically think, well, he's going to go see the doctor. But when he sees the doctor asks him about symptoms. What can I do with those symptoms? Now, let me also think, maybe if I geolocate this piece of information, I could learn the movement of those symptoms. All of a sudden, just from building a hospital system, I build a surveillance network, because I can see all the symptoms moving around from the single node of truth, which is the doctor and the patient. But I've still digitized the hospital. But first, because I thought of data, I create new systems and new solutions of what I'm trying to digitize. Does it make sense? So I'm not just rushing into the infrastructure. Oh, we need to build this thing. We need to develop this thing. You'll get there. The development part is easy. Anyone can build stuff. It's the thinking part of the pieces of data across any given network, and how that data will become interoperable with other networks. So all of a sudden, I'm thinking, what if I bring in climate data into this piece of data? What would that tell me? So you start thinking about new forms and new models of ideas around the same thing that you could have just built as a simple infrastructure. And that is the beauty of data transformation. Before building any technology, understanding the data sets that you're actually using to build means you architect a data landscape before building. And sometimes it takes months, but it's actually one of the most innovative lessons you can go through as a developer. So if you look at what I call the IDP model, years ago, the traditional approach to building technology is basically people will think about an infrastructure, right? I want to build something, so let's build this platform. Let's build this technology to do all this stuff. Then you think secondary about the data, because yeah, you're collecting the data, but basically you're just creating systems that allow you to do things faster and quicker. You're not necessarily thinking through the data sets. Then the people are the last part of what you think about. So mostly is the dev team, maybe a bit of the digital team. Everybody else in the company don't even know why you've built this thing. They just do it. So you just launch this platform in the bank, 80% of people who work there just use it. So they use the barest minimum. But we as the tech team, we know exactly what we've done. It's beautiful. It's amazing. But this guy in compliance is like, dude, I really don't care about this stuff. It's making my life difficult. But you're like, no, this is great. And I've been in so many different conversations where they say, it doesn't work. Have you ever been in those conversations where they just say, it doesn't work? You're like, but why? This thing works. I've gone back to my computer. I checked it. It works. Like, no, it doesn't work for us. It's not compatible. So they give you all, say, you're frustrated because the people are the last thing that you think about. And also, most times in organization, maybe if you go back to your businesses, ask the receptionist, why are you doing what you do? Why do you use the systems that you actually do? So we have a receptionist, and we built this appointment management system where people come in. So she would just register people whatever way she wants to. If my name is John, she'll just say J-O, and she'll register Kamara, whatever, because she didn't understand the value of the data. For her, it was, she registered, the system works, move on. And these are millions of data sets that we were collecting that over time, if we analyze that information, we could understand a little bit better who comes to our business, what they do, how they do it, how much time they spend, and what more efficiencies we can build within that operational ecosystem. But for her, it wasn't important. She's just used the system. And she prints the badge and gives to the person. And the person comes upstairs. So when we go back into the database, it's a bunch of jargon, because nothing makes sense. Do you understand? So a lot of these things, this IDP model, so many organizations, in 2000, when we first started digital transformation, most organizations, especially one that I like to use a lot, was State Street. Anybody know State Street here? Yeah, back in the day, State Street started a massive project in the US about transformation digitally. And they spent millions of dollars, and we were part of the team that did the whole, But one of the things that we learned over that period was all we focused on was how we built this infrastructure, which meant years and years and years and years later, State Street had to go back and try to figure out how to extract this data from this infrastructure that was built. Have you ever had that situation? I mean, I have a client now who's a big bank, and they've given me all these data sets, and I'm thinking there's not much I can do with this stuff. But they're a digital bank, and they work well. But the cost of acquisition, the cost of service, and the cost of value, which could have been reduced if the data was actually clear, becomes impossible because now they have to. So a lot of the times when we think about transformation digitally, in the old days, people talked about infrastructure first. And then we went to the new era, where we had organizations like Facebook, Google, Uber, Netflix, who understood the value of data, right? So they basically built a DIP model, which I call DIP. Now, these organizations, they understood that data was a critical part of the business, isn't it? So they basically said, everything we do is going to be led by data. We don't make any emotional decisions. How many people make emotional decisions in the companies? Like, even in marriage, how many people make emotional decisions? If you make data-driven decisions, it could also help. But I'm not saying you should, but but the idea was that they understood the power of data. So what they did, they used data as the critical infrastructure. So when they built technology, it was all built around harnessing data for intelligence, which basically means we harness data for intelligence so we can automate, get better, and reduce the amount of people that we needed to do work. So we can, scale quickly and fast across multiple jurisdictions because we understand data. So these organizations over time, and some of them, I worked with about 2 of them. We could see how data was so critical, how we collected the data, and how you optimize the data in real time was extremely critical to the business intelligence and to the business growth and the continuity of the business. So when you talked about data, they built a pure financial model to data. So they didn't think about data from a technical perspective. They thought about it from a financial perspective. So that when you go to the CFO, you're talking about data in correlation to finance. Again, I like stories a lot. I had another situation with another bank, and the CCO was like, I'm telling my boss, everyone, that data is the future. And nobody just wants to spend money. I'm like, well, the CFO is thinking, where's the money? Are you going to sell the data to someone so they pay us? No. So tell me how I'm going to make money off this data, or how it's going to save me money. So you have to run a direct line for me between the data, what we're currently doing now, and how that's going to save us money or make us money. So you need to think like a finance person. You have to stop thinking like a technical person, because the people you're talking to don't really understand a lot of the big words you're saying. That's for you and me. So we went back to the boss and said, okay, well, this is what it means. If you do X, you make X amount of money. And it's like, do you guarantee that? I can't guarantee that, but that is the idea. But over time, the CEO was like, okay, let's do this, because now I can see the commercial value of what it is that I'm about to do. This guy was just telling me all this technical stuff, which is great. That's why I hired him. He's amazing. But I don't know what he's saying half of the time, because he doesn't break it to me in English. Simple English. Data, money. Right? Data, money. So we see a lot of intelligent, super clever CTOs in organizations, and they struggle to convince the organization to invest. They struggle to convince the organization to see the value of going through this transformational journey at the speed of lightning. So a lot of these organizations use data because they understood that it was important, but they were all building for AI. Because again, most of them, as we talked about AI, it didn't just happen yesterday. It'd been happening. So organizations who were already thinking about it were thinking, well, this is what we want to do. So we need to basically start harnessing this data so that we can do what we need to do. So that we can do a lot of those things that you see today. But it was thinking through the aspect of the data sets that they were going to collect to train in real time to do what they needed to do today. So it didn't just happen overnight. Now, what happened in most of these organizations, again, is that the people were left behind. And when I talk about the people, I'm not necessarily just talking, again, about just developers. I'm talking about the organization as a whole. People were left behind. Then, one of the things that I found out was, despite investing in all these cutting-edge technologies, a lot of organizations find themselves struggling to harness the full potential of the investment in the data era. And the critical thing that I believe is people. The critical intelligence is people. The same insurance company that I was doing a workshop for, quite a number of people in their teams had been doing this thing for about 7, 8, 9 years, and they had different metrics of success, right? But when a lot of these people, when you sat with them, each person had an algorithm of how they did stuff over time. Do you understand that? Each person had an algorithm how they did convince a customer, how they figured out how to repurpose a business strategy. But it was all in their head. So, but obviously you could build a system to say, this is how we do this process from end to end. But you're not capturing the intelligence of the people over time. The intelligence that the people had built in running these businesses, doing these businesses, and succeeding using different algorithms that they had But they didn't know that it was algorithms that they were deploying. They just thought, this is how I do it. And this is how I've acquired my own success. It doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. But and so if you look at a lot of those people in so many organizations, you realize the amount of intelligence in people. So imagine being able to harness that intelligence into the way you build infrastructure. Imagine being able to harness that intelligence into the way you build technology and into the way you use data to repurpose the business value or the key business drivers. And also imagine how you use that intelligence when you actually want to do automation or machine learning before you even go into deep learning and other sides of technology. So then comes the black screen. So came to the idea. So in 2022, I was at a big conference in Geneva, and we're talking about what would be the role of humans in AI. And it was a very important topic because we were thinking if you remove the less than 5% of people who understand the technical skills, what would happen to the rest of the people? And especially in organizations as well, what would happen to people? In my organization, I could probably get rid of half of the people today. I could. And I would automate so many things. There's a lot of great tools that people have built and not necessarily have to hire. But that is not my belief of why AI exists in the world for us. I believe the idea is for a human coactivity where humans are at the center of using the technology for economic and social change. And especially in a continent where we have massive unemployment. Imagine what would happen if you AI everything and remove the human. What do you think would happen? Anyone? What do you think would happen? Exactly. So how do we bring people into the role of data, using data to actually drive productivity? There comes the PDI model. I'm going to go to the next slide first, then come back. So the idea of the PDI model is that people are the base foundation of everything that we do. People, data, and infrastructure. Data is the most important part, but the people, understanding how, so we run AI readiness programs now for a lot of folks. So in November last year, I was in Cairo for AfriExim, where I was giving a talk to a lot of people in the creative industry. And quite a lot of women came to me after the talk and said, hey, John, look, I don't know what to do anymore because I used to have this print. And this print, basically, it was my handwork, it was X, it was Y. But all of a sudden, with AI, people can do these things faster and quicker than me. And I have been, for the past 7, 8 years, really building my career around. And so what do I do? And that was one of the first industries that's being cannibalized, creativity, right? So what do I do? Because people can do this thing faster than me. And, so AfriExim had decided, look, how do we help people in the creative industry become still relevant in this age of artificial intelligence? So I said to the lady, okay, well, unfortunately, we can't turn back the hands of time. Then even Gemini hadn't come out. So imagine now, we can't turn back the hands of time. And the speed at which this thing is moving, I need to bring you up to speed with this technology. I can teach you very quickly how to use this technology so much better with your own intelligence and algorithm. You can now begin to define and create things that are very specific to you, but at the speed of lightning. So I'm going to teach you for 3 weeks. So I spent 3 weeks with all of them. Today, I can comfortably say to you that those women are producing things faster and quicker, selling it at cheaper rates, but doing multiple volumes of the same thing they did. But 7 months ago, they almost felt redundant. So the point is, if we don't build qualitative human capital, the word, qualitative human capital. That's what I want to leave you with today. We have a lot of quantitative human capital on this continent. A lot of human capital. And every time I'm in Geneva, they talk about the amount of people in Africa, the youths, so many of them. But the value of a quantitative human capital is less than 100% of a qualitative human capital in other societies. That is why the core value of the human in those societies is more valuable than in ours. Qualitative human capital. And this technology has given us the opportunity to reinforce and speed up how we build qualitative human capital. Am I making sense? So when you look at your organization and you think, before I build this technology, do my salespeople understand why I'm going to do this? What do they need? How do I need to capacitate them to become important to the organization, where I remove the burden of fear from them? That, you know what, you're not going to lose your job because I'm automating this process. My finance and compliance people, what do they feel about what I'm doing? My customer service, even the receptionist. Because all these are the people here that as we build this technology, we have to be cognizant of the fact that they are at the edge of cannibalization. And like I said to you, I can probably fire 50% of my staff today, because there's so many tools that I can just plug together and use them and automate. I'm a small business, so I can do so many things remotely. But what does that mean for the future of this continent? What does that mean for the future of South Africa? What does that mean for the future of Nigeria? What does that mean for the future of the young kids that we're talking about? So it's not just about you. It's not about you and how good you are. It's not about you and what you can build. It's about you understanding that you are part of this ecosystem that has to drive qualitative human intelligence into everyone. Leave no one behind. Leave no one behind. And that is the idea of PDI. People. The people are the torch bearers of transformation in AI. As we started in the beginning, it was people who was developing the technology, wasn't it? It wasn't a machine that started the technology, was it? It was people. And there's a lot of people who can also contribute to the intelligent framework that we need to build contextual models that we can actually use for our own development. And data. The way we then think about the data in organizations becomes the bloodstream, because you're not thinking about data as an afterthought. We're not building to collect data. No. We're understanding data first before we build. So we understand internal, external, human, and potential market force data. Then we build the technology around the data. Because then how you harness the data becomes real time. And, you know, a lot of time when I go across the world, people always say, well, there is no data in Africa, but that's a lie. I believe it's not true. There's a lot of data. How many of you have data silos in your organization? Yeah, data silos. Even in government, there's so much data, but there's also a lot of unnecessary, unusable data, which is just information. So I once asked in a room, I said, what is data? Just like simplify it. I said, oh, well, data is, the torchbearers of transformation is AI. That's not data, that's information. Data is metadata, very basic piece of information on its own means nothing. But when you combine it with other parameters, it begins to tell you scientific knowledge that you couldn't see before at the speed when you have massive compute power. So when I say John doesn't mean anything, right? It could be a name, it could be a place, it could be anything. But when I say John, 38, okay. John could be 38. John might be born in 1938. John could have 38 kids. All of a sudden, you start, I don't have 38 kids, she's laughing. That is not data. Remove that information from your brain. But just that one piece of data, when you then basically add other parameters to it, so how you collect that one piece of data. So when you say at that reception, they say, John Kamara instead of Kamara John, it means two completely different things. 6/11, I'm not going to tell you the rest of my date of birth, but you can still find out. Or 11/6, and I've seen this thing, so many tiny little pieces of information that you assume it's not relevant. So when you want to now train that model, that's when you begin to understand the relevance of accuracy and the critical. So the person collecting the data for you, which are the people who work in this organization, if you don't give them the knowledge and the understanding why accuracy is so important in what they do, they will just do the barest minimum. And you'll come back later and you have all these massive data lakes. God, I had so many data lake conversations. And then you go into them, it's like opening this store, and you're like, half of your bag of maize is completely dead. So, and the infrastructure, that is what you then build around this data. That is what you build to transform that organization. That part, in my view, I reckon, is the easiest part. The hardest part is the people part. Transforming people in organizations to become torchbearers for data. How do you do that? How do you transform a person to be a torchbearer for data? And how do you provide them with qualitative knowledge to make them more valuable in that organization so they don't feel scared for this new technology that is coming? And how do we build a qualitative human capital ecosystem in this continent? Because we have the people, we have the consumer economy, we do not have the producer economy. And if you look at the process, even as an organization, when you talk about the primary functions of your business and you look at where the people sit and where the data sits and your infrastructure, if you combine that with a methodology that allows you to harness the power of each, all of a sudden, that organization will automate itself. It becomes a self-learning organization, self-serving, knowledge-sharing organization that drives both the consumer and the people in one direction. So what you're then building has value from the source of the baseline, which is the people within and the business. Because at the end of the day, who knows the business in the organization? Who knows the business? It's the people. I mean, even when we automate restaurants that are fully automated with computer robotics, who made the food in the first place? There was a chef who created the recipe, isn't it? And then you had to train the robot to understand the recipe, right? So why don't I train the chef to be way better to understand how to make the robot work better? Why do I have to eliminate the chef? So that's my belief, that we are drivers of a massive movement of social change and brilliance in qualitative human capital across all the business ecosystems that we're in as the ones who are at the forefront of understanding this technology. So as you're going back into your organizations, what you're preaching is not adopt AI, or adopt is, where is the role of everyone in my organization? And how do I drive a moving vehicle together? And that's where you get the resistance. And this is fact, I didn't make this up. A lot of people, and I've talked to so many people, see the fear of the unknown. Most people in organizations that you speak to are just afraid. in their own organizations because they do not understand why, and they don't understand what is coming. Have you ever, watched science fiction movies? Who watches science fiction movies? I love you guys. So you're watching this movie and you don't know what's coming. And you're just like, whoa, this is what's happening. It could go either way. What is coming? And a lot of organizations are quick. So a friend of mine who runs a carbon credit, one of the largest wind farms in East Africa, he says to me the other day, he's like, the CEO, he said, John, thank you for that thing that you showed me. I've gotten rid of my PR team. Like, no, that's not why I showed you this stuff. I said, no, I don't need that PR company anymore. We can do all this stuff now. Just teach me how to prompt better. Like, God damn. Okay, I need to come back to your company to help you understand that you can't get rid of your PR team, okay? Your PR team, I'm going to teach them how to use these tools much better so that they can become more efficient for you and still give you identity. ChatGPT can't give you identity. It can't. Maybe later on we'll build some, but until today, it can't give you identity. It can give you similarities, and I can decipher that similarity because I can know that this is actually what you used to create this information. But you can use it as a framework for your team to do things faster, and then they can add the identity of your organization to that, right? Instead of firing everyone, because your press release would be the same, basically. So a lot of organizations, and you also see on the other side, where market growth and business adoption, especially if you look at the challenges organizations face in terms of data and the talent that is involved. So ultimately, AI versus human labor, that is where we are going in this new economy. AI versus human labor. And we have to make a conscious decision where we want human labor to play. I watched something the other day, and it said we are making dumber and dumber human beings slowly. And it's true. To an extent, we are. So, because the intelligence is growing faster and faster, and everyone else is not catching up with that intelligence. So, what world are we creating for human labor? So, as developers, as experts, which you guys are, not me, we have a moral obligation. We have a duty, not just to yourself or to your organization, but to the people who work in your organization, to understand how do I drive qualitative human capital for my organization and for the people to also give them the toolkit they need to become much more valuable. And that's really it. A lot of it is around because of time. I know we are running short of time. I could go on and on for a very long time. But I believe that in the continent, we have the opportunity to build IPs that are driven by human intelligence. I'm a big believer in IP development. And until we begin to harness the general power, so when you talk about artificial general human intelligence, AGHI, harness the power of the human intelligence to build solutions that then transform our own ecosystems where we become the producers and we already have consumers who understand the value why. We would then use this technology to transcend as an organization, as a population, as people, but also building the large base for qualitative human capital. Thank you very much.